Really kind of an amazing hand, and I've been in that spot before as well, where I think my opponent is bluffing. I make a bluff catch with some sort of hand that has some showdown value, and then you end up poker.com hand review from High Stakes Poker. And this one, we're going to get into it with Tom Dwan versus Michael Schwimer. This one comes from episode 8 of this latest season here of High Stakes Poker. And in this particular hand, they were playing 400, 800 with an $800 big blind ante, which is kind of a newer thing the last few years in No Limit Hold'em. Put the big blind ante out, it's quicker. And they're going to start with about 100,000 effective, which is Schwimmer, the smaller stack here. And they're playing seven-handed. And it gets folded over here to Schwimmer, and he's going to raise it up a little bit on the loose side with 4-5 offsuit from the cutoff. Gets folded here to Tom Dwan, and he is going to 3-bet it with ace-king offsuit, so an open to 3,000. 3-bet here to 13,000. And really, if I was in Schwimmer's spot, I would just fold here. Dwan has chosen a little bit of a larger sizing from out of position, about 110, 120 big blinds effective. Gonna have better hands here than 4-5 offsuit to defend with, maybe down to 4-5 suited. So really, this should probably just be a pitch pre-flop if it's even really opened, before the flop. But Schwimmer decides to gamble it up a little bit, and he makes the call. So the board comes out 4-5 deuce, rainbow, and Tom Dwan is going to make a continuation bet here of about half the size of the pot. Now, obviously, you can see here that Schwimmer has flopped top 2 pair, and he is in position. Now, whenever I'm in a spot like this and I have to consider whether or not I want to slow play or just call, I really look at sort of how the board might change, what the action card killing possibilities really are. And on a board like this, which basically contains a wheel draw for any ace high, I'm more often than not going to raise actually right away, even with position. You don't really have to make it large with these stack sizes. He could make it something like 30 to 35,000, something like that. And what you're going to find is a lot of people, if they do have ace high, like ace king, ace queen, they're going to call. They're going to take one off. They have 2 overcards basically and a gut shot. And obviously, the other portion of hands that Dwan could have would be like overpairs, and obviously overpairs are going to continue on here as well. If you just call, you sort of gamble on the fact that a wet card might come on the turn. And also too, if someone actually has ace high and it happens to come an ace on the turn, they're most likely going to check. So you're going to have to start putting some money in. So more often than not, I actually think that I would put in a small raise here if I'm Schwimmer. He just calls, and we head to the turn. So with just over 55,000 in there, the turn is an ace. It's the ace of hearts that puts a backdoor heart draw out there. You can see here, Dwan, now makes top pair, but of course there's a one-liner out there to a 3. Not surprisingly, he checks, and it's kind of interesting here for Schwimmer because you're really not going to put your opponent on a 3-betting out of the small blind. You do beat single paired aces. I actually like a really small turn bet here for a little bit of protection and also for value. You don't really have to go that large. You could even bet 25-30% a pot, and you're going to definitely get called by single paired aces, and maybe even some overpairs are going to call here, basically as well. If you check it back, you're really not building a pot up, and you might not see a bet from out of position as a reflection of a value bet with somebody with a single paired ace. But he doesn't think too long, and he checks it back, and now we get to the river. So the river is an offsuit jack, and you can see the final board is 4-5 deuce ace jack, and Dwan actually does something that's fairly non-standard, I would say. He's actually going to put out a value bet here on this sort of super wet board, and I think that he probably thinks that Schwimmer has some sort of pair, something like 9s, 10s, or he might have a worse ace high, like an ace queen. Obviously, he loses to ace jack, but any ace high is basically going to be 2 overcards and a straight draw. So he actually puts out a value bet here of 25,000. And because Schwimmer sort of checked back the turn, you wouldn't really expect him to have a whole lot of 3s or sets. I mean, it was just call, check back the turn. So he's basically trying to get called buy a weaker ace and an occasional pair, something like that. So what's really interesting here is Schwimmer sort of goes into the tank. He kind of looks disgusted on the high stakes TV show. And then he suddenly moves all in, which is just really, really strange. And it's really strange for the reasons that I really just talked about. Usually someone's not going to really move all in here unless they have a three, have a straight, or they had a really, really strong hand. You might not even see somebody move all in here necessarily with ace jack. It's somewhat of a polarizing kind of spot, even though the stacks aren't that deep. Now, when he moves all in here, it's 73,000 total. So when he gets back over to Dwan, it's really 48,000 to call for a pot of just over 150,000. So he's really sort of getting 3-1 here. And I would be confused here too if I was Tom Dwan and I didn't think my opponent would shove at the end here with ace jack. What's really interesting here is that I don't know really what Schwimmer was doing. It's very, very bizarre to take a hand like 4-5, which is the equivalent to bottom two pair, and now shove it. You're really only trying to basically get value from a hand like ace king or ace queen, but I don't think he was trying to really get value. I think he thought that he was bluffing. Now, sometimes you see this when somebody's out of position and they just don't know what to do and they just bet because they don't want to check and face like a large bet. But usually in position, when you're in one of these in-between spots, a guy will just check it back and basically take, his showdown. Very, very bizarre. And I think that Dwan really struggled with this one, getting 3-1. He just couldn't understand what hand Schwimmer would do this with. So he thought maybe he would be good here 1 out of 4 times. And he threw in the frustrating call. And what was amazing was that when he called, Schwimmer sort of gave this look of, what do you have? He didn't say good call, but that's kind of what his face looked like good call. And Dwan said, well, I don't have much. I have ace king, which if I was in Dwan's spot, I'd probably be excited that Schwimmer wasn't turning over his hand. And then Schwimmer turned over 4-5. And it was just so confusing because it really appeared that Schwimmer was bluffing and he got called by a worse hand on his bluff. Really kind of an amazing hand, and I've been in that spot before as well where I think my opponent is bluffing. I make a bluff catch with some sort of hand that has some showdown value, and then you end up losing to a bluff. It's usually when you call with ace high and your opponent turns over like pocket deuces or bottom pair, and they were in fact bluffing. You were right on your read, but they just happen to have kind of a stronger hand than what you do at showdown. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, and you'll get notified every time a new video comes out right here on the Crush Live Poker YouTube channel.